Today, we're going to tackle story elements. So, story elements, when I look at this chart, it shows me that a story is made of different pieces, different parts. You, as a fifth grader, need to be able to take those parts out. So, earlier this week, we focused on setting. Setting is the time or the place where a story is happening. Characters. Let me just push you on what you had to know about characters. Not only do you have to know who makes up the story, you have to be able to describe them and their traits. And in order to pick out what traits best describe a character, you have to think about things they say, things they do, or what other characters say or do in relation to those characters. But this year also, we have to begin to think about how characters develop in stories. So how does a character, after it goes through some conflict, some stress, some problems, how does a character change? So those are the things we've gone over earlier this week. But beginning today and tomorrow and from here on out, when we look at a story, we need to be able to look at its plot. And so in order to do that best, I think that this illustrates it a little better. When you go to middle school, you're going to have to be able to use this chart a little more than you will for us. But whether you are the reader or whether you are a writer, this is what a good story looks like. So a good story begins with a little bit of background, or I usually say the normal. Like what are things like when things are all happy and normal? But then as the story progresses, there's some kind of conflict, some kind of problem or stress begins to happen. And this conflict grows worse and worse and worse until it's at its peak. And so in this chart, it's called the rising action. But you might just think of it as the stress and how the stress builds or the problem gets worse and worse. And so the climax of the story is when the problem is its very worst. And so if we were to take apart Esperanza back at the beginning when we knew that things were happy with her family and things were normal, that would be the background when Papa was just her papa. But the first bit of conflict was when Papa when he didn't come home and when we knew something was wrong there and then he was murdered. But the problem did not stop there. And so the problem has gotten worse and worse for Esperanza and her mother. And now they are faced with considering leaving or marrying one of the uncles, the mother, not Esperanza. Anyway, to go back to this chart here, when the problem reaches its highest point or highest level of stress, then things will gradually get better and better. Not immediately, though, because it doesn't happen like that in a good story. Otherwise, it's not believable. But anyway, by the end of the story, or by the end where there's a happy ending, that would be a resolution. So I see the word solution there. So that reminds me to go back to the story elements now. So another way to look at plot is to think about what was the problem in the story and what was the solution. We don't only want to be able to talk about the problem and solution, we want to be able to talk about the key events of the story. And so those are some terms that moving forward that we need to begin to practice. Key events are the events of the story that you might put in a chart like this. Okay, so the key events are the parts of a story as a story develops. The problem is the main struggle or conflict that a character is going through, and the way that that problem gets solved is the solution. So I know that's kind of a lot of information. We'll continue to practice over the next couple days. I hope you enjoy today.